Hello, my name's Nathaniel Rankin, and you're listening to Youth Spin. Now, Youth Spin operates here in Austin, Texas, out of the Griffin School. In 1983, the Cola Wars were raging between Pepsi and Coca-Cola. At Coke's 1983 sales convention, they handed out an Atari 2600 cartridge to their sales representatives in order to boost their morale. This cartridge went on to become one of the most rare Atari games of all time. Pepsi Invaders. Game is simple, it's Space Invaders. But instead of featuring the aliens invading Earth, it features the letters P-E-P-S-I and one other alien because Pepsi doesn't have enough letters to fill out the screen, invading Earth. However, they aren't really invading because they don't move down, and there's no way for you to lose because you have infinite lives. There's no score, instead the word Coke is written very large on the screen where the score would be. There's a 3-minute timer set for when the game ends, originally developed by Atari, but the developer of Space Invaders had left Atari due to general disagreement, so they got a different developer to hack the game. Overall rating, the product placement isn't very good. If anything, it advertises more for Pepsi than it does for Coke, and the gameplay's fine. It's really not a great game. 4 out of 10. Now, this was the first game in a series known as Advergames. These games feature only product placement as opposed to throwing it in like they did in 1983's Tapper. These games are created purely for advertisement. Now, they've been around for a long while, and I'm here to play through some of them firsthand and tell you a bit about my experiences and the history of those games. First, some honorable mentions: the King games, which are notorious for being very odd games for Burger King, those games being Sneak King, Big Bumpin', and Pocket Bike Racers. Now, another example of an advergame using a pre-existing game's format is 1990's Yo Noid. This game was for the beloved Domino's mascot, the Noid, who's playing the hero in this adventure. The game involves the Noid trying to stop Mr. Green, which is a green Noid, from destroying New York City. The game features you running, skateboarding, or flying around and attacking creatures with your yo-yo. Yo Noid is, as I mentioned, just a texture swap of a different game, this being the Japanese game Kamen no Ninja Hanamaru, which translates to Masked Ninja Hanamaru, which in itself was made using a modified version of the game Wagon Land. Now, Hanamaru features a ninja using a hawk to attack enemies in the style of Banjo-Kazooie, in place of the Noid's yo-yo. Both feature many similarities in gameplay. Now, Yo Noid was a frustrating game for me to play through due to its many frustrating mechanics, and I only played the first stage. It featured a confusing, hard-to-understand boss battle, a pizza-eating competition. Oh, let me check my notes there. Actually, the boss battle and pizza-eating competition are the same thing. Enemies exist that will just kill you in one hit, and there's moving tides that don't load in at the same rate as their textures, thus leading you to drown on dry land. The game generally made me unhappy, and the pizza isn't even Domino's branded. I still understand people enjoying it in a very difficult sense, but it's just not for me. Overall rating, product placement, alright. Like I mentioned, no Domino's advertising. Alright gameplay. Overall, I'd give it a 5/6 out of 10. In 1992, it was Cheetos' turn. They released Chester Cheetah Too Cool to Fool, and it was met with a very mediocre reception. The game features Chester Cheetah himself running around trying to escape the evil and violent Mean Eugene, who put him in a zoo because he is a cheetah. Chester Cheetah occasionally rides a scooter in levels if you can collect every piece of the scooter. The game's manual features a classic video game phrase, "as is Chester Cheetah way, is one-person play." It was developed by Kaneko, who would also be known for Socks the Cat Rocks the Hill, an infamous canceled game that was canceled due to the closure of Neko's US branch, centered around Bill Clinton's favorite feline, Socks, running around Capitol Hill and trying to save the president. The game, Chester Cheetah, not Socks the Cat, we're back to this now, features a Donkey Kong Country-style side-scrolling platforming with painted backgrounds and hard-to-understand controls. Number one biggest issue is the fact that after you take damage, Chester Cheetah stands in place and shakes violently for 2 seconds. Overall, it's got some standard, solid platforming gameplay, even if it is difficult to grip what's going on. But it also never mentions Cheetos. I mean, Chester Cheetah is, of course, synonymous with the Cheetos brand, but it's still a little odd. Overall, 6 out of 10 game. 1 year after release of Too Cool to Fool, Cool Spot released. Cool Spot is widely regarded as one of the best Advergames of all time, but I found it borderline unbearable. Now, the game features Cool Spot, who's an anthropomorphic spot who runs around shooting at crabs, worms, and different types of crabs, at least in the first stage. The story is largely nonsensical and features you grabbing smaller spots and collecting them to open a cage containing what I believe is a clone of you. I'm not sure how to describe the gameplay other than frustrating. You can't shoot at an angle without walking. The balloons you have to grab on have precise hitboxes, the running is complex, and the enemies are much too compacted to single areas. The game's soundtrack, too, is mediocre, which I only mentioned because I had to hear it so many times, and it pushed me to my limit. It was made by Virgin Interactive, the game division of Richard Branson's conglomerate Virgin Group. Overall rating for this game, I hated it. It had fine product placement, but that doesn't mean I didn't hate it. 3 out of 10, not a fan. Now, you just heard the renowned intro to 2000's Pepsi Man, which is, in my opinion, the best game on this list, at least from an advertising standpoint. Pepsi Man centers around titular character's quest to save the city from thirst, which he does by fixing Pepsi shortages. The game has you run through houses, streets, and factories to get to the Pepsi-needing citizens of the world. Pepsi Man seems to be a very large, muscular man in a skin-tight morph suit with Pepsi branding on him. The developers, KID, are a Japanese company that did little else too well known here in the States, although the game's controls can be a bit stiff and the advertising is so blatant it comes off as a parody at times. It still has a good bit of value for those willing to play it. It's similar to Crash Bandicoot if you're into that type of game, and all in all, pretty fun. And it also features some very entertaining, strange breaks in the gameplay in the form of live-action clips with the stereotypical American man shouting at you. I suggest you play it, but hey, that's just me. Overall, 8 out of 10. Excellent product placement. Next up on the docket, we have 2010's Doritos Crash Course. It was originally called Avatar Crash Course, but the game was rebranded after it was a finalist in a contest that was sponsored by Doritos. People behind the game, Behavior Santiago, were a studio who also made the Wipeout games, which you can see reflected in the gameplay styling of Crash Course. You run through obstacle courses and attempt to beat certain times in order to win. The game is free, and you would expect that means there's loads of advertising to make up for that. However, quite the opposite. There is no advertising. None. In fact, the most advertising the game even features is being named Doritos Crash Course. It controls fine, discounting obnoxious slip systems, but is barely even an Advergame. I just call it a game at this point. Overall, it's a pretty solid game and fun to play through, but if you're looking for games with a lot of advertisements or want to learn about Advergames in that way, just don't play it. Skip this one. It's not an Advergame. The final game I will cover today is an odd one. Eminem's Beach Party. This game is a train wreck. You play as any Eminem of your choice, yes, even the green one, and enjoy 6 games featuring classic beach party fare like Ring Toss, Skee Ball, and Mr. Runch Slam. Overall ranking the games, I would probably place it Colornator, a game where you squirt paint at gray M&Ms, Kayak Race, which is, shockingly enough, a kayak race, Ring Toss, which is a game where you throw life preservers at buoys and can't hit certain targets physically, Mr. Runch Slam, which I will explain the concept of to you in a moment, Skee Ball, which has awful arm detection that barely even works, and Volleyball, a game that has bad hit detection, counts score based on who served, has awful in-depth models, and generally just suck. Mr. Runch Slam is a game based around you slamming Mr. Runch, in case you haven't noticed. Mr. Runch himself is a character from Eminem's Breakum, which creates an Eminem's multiverse, who is described as a rotten and dangerous peanut fiercely determined on being one of the M&Ms. The minigame has you slam a platform that he sits on as you try to flip him onto lily pads with a hammer, and it just has general bad hit detection. The funniest thing about the game is that the AI will instantly try to shoot as far to the left as possible, causing them to instantly lose. The strangest thing about Beach Party as a whole is the fact that there's roughly no information on the internet besides 2 sentences on Wikipedia and Metacritic reviews. Looks like the government covered this one up, folks. Rating, overall, fine gameplay, fine advertising, just a 6 out of 10 game. Well, that covers all the games I had access to, but as you heard in the introduction, there are many more. Seek them out and enjoy them for yourselves if you get a chance. I've been Nate Rankin.